Well, this is Jim Fetzer, your host, right here on the Raw Deal on Revolution Radio on this 22nd day of December 2023. On the eve of Christmas as it is, I wanted to put together a spectacular show, and I believe I have achieved that for you today. My very special guest is an extraordinary man I've known for over 20 years. He's published a very large number of books, including some highly controversial. He may be the leading expert on the royal family of the UK, and from all I can put together, he actually is a proper, legitimate ascendant to the throne of England. Were he to be crowned, he would designate himself as King John III. Greg Hallett, what a pleasure to have you here, my friend. Just a joy.
Thanks, Jim. Happy Christmas.
Yeah. Same to you. For any who may be unaware, why don't you give us a little background about your study of the history of the royal family and how you came to recognize your own role in the lineage?
Well, that's a huge topic. First of all, is this live?
Yes.
It's live.
Yes, we're live.
Oh, okay. I thought we were going to record it and then post it out later.
Very good.
Okay, so, well, it was about 2007 I started to recognize that various individuals were completely illegitimate, including King George V, who was the king of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and all Ireland from 1910 to 1936. He was actually the son of Tsar Alexander III of Russia. So I wrote that up in about a 35-page document and sent it off to Queen Elizabeth II, Prince Philip, Prince Charles, the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Pope, the Prime Minister of the UK, President of Russia, President of America, Prime Minister of Israel. And I ended up sending out about 25 of these proclamations. They eventually became proclamations, so I changed the color of the stitching, which is called red tape. And it's usually done in a red ribbon, or a pink or crimson ribbon. And that's where you get the name red tape from. And then I started to do it in the sovereign white tape. And Queen Elizabeth started to act out my instructions on these proclamations. And so did the President of Israel and the Prime Minister of Israel and the President of Russia and the President of the United States of America. So that was kind of interesting. And then I've just written another 13 books called British Frauds on England's History. And that's about the Jesuit takeover of England, which really started in 1603 with King James VI of Scotland, who became supposedly King James VI of Scotland, who supposedly became King James I of England. And what I found out was that that actually didn't happen. None of it was legal. So we had the real King James VI, Mary Queen of Scots' son, the Prince James Charles or Charles James, they don't know which, who was supposedly crowned King James VI of Scotland when he was 13 months old. In actual fact, he died when he was 2.5 days old, and he was replaced with the witness's son, who was born on the same day, and he was called John Forbes. And then he was replaced with John Erskine, who was actually crowned King James VI of Scotland. And then his father died, so he had to become the second Earl of Mar. So he got replaced with his cousin. And then all the Scottish royals had a breeding race to produce a son at the same time as James VI. and they produced another 6 James VI, and they were all rounded up in Ruthven Castle and then kidnapped for 11 months. And then they had a Jesuit servant, and the Jesuit servant studied them, all these 6 fake King James VI, and then poisoned them, and then wrote a poem how he poisoned them in Slains Castle, and then set up Slains Castle for tourism for Catholics to go and see where he'd murdered all the James VI. And then he went down to St Andrew's Castle, and some passing Jesuits just happened to be there visiting St Catherine's Cathedral, and they said, "Oh, look, there's the missing King James VI. He must be the king." And the primate of Scotland was in jail at the time under St Andrew's Castle. So this Jesuit servant ended up becoming King James VI of Scotland because no one had seen him. And then he became King James VI of England. But because he wasn't actually ever crowned King James VI of Scotland, they changed the name of England to Britain. Not Britain, but Britain, Brittaine. And Francis Bacon, who was his Lord Chancellor, pointed out that Britain was not a legal entity. So we had King James I of England, who was actually King James I of Britain, who was actually never King James King James VI of Scotland. So we had this fake British monarchy from 1603 to the present day.
Yes, yes, yes. And by the way, I have here your 5-volume set on the Hidden
Good.
King of England, Greg, which must be the most thorough and detailed ever carried out about the royal family, where you make the impeccable case that the Windsors are not legitimate heirs to the throne of England. Could you elaborate?
Yeah, well, those books are now selling for around 5,200 euros for that set. So, if you want to sell them back to me, that'd be great. I could hook them off. Basically, the whole British royal family is a dirty mafia operation. There's no clean bits in it. So James VI of Scotland was illegitimate. He was just a commoner. James I of England was illegitimate, the same illegitimate commoner, and he was never actually crowned King of England. They changed it to Britain. And they locked up the true King of England, who was Walter Raleigh, who was actually Walter Boleyn. He was Queen Anne Boleyn's grandson. So on the illegitimate side of the British royal family, you've got James I and Charles I, Charles II and James II. James II was actually run out of England for being Catholic, but really he was just a long line of Stuart illegitimates. And then you've got, skipping a few, you've got George I, George II, George III, George IV. George III's wife, Charlotte, was an illegitimate half Negro woman whose father was Peter the Cannibal. His name was actually, so King George III of England's father-in-law was Peter the Cannibal. So they changed his name to Peter Gannibal. George IV failed to legitimately marry, and he failed to produce any legitimate heirs. Then it went to William IV, and he got no legitimate heirs from his wife, and he hooked up with this actress woman called Dorothy Jordan, who had 15 children to 5 different men. So she was a bit loose, and produced 10 illegitimate children to William IV, and one of those descendants is David Cameron, who was the United Kingdom's most ineffective Prime Minister ever, and other MPs were just standing up and saying it on TV when he was being removed, that he was the, or just after he'd been removed, that he was the most ineffective prime minister and he achieved absolutely nothing in 6 years. So, so then we've got Queen Victoria. She was the daughter of the French Baron Jacob Maillard de Rothschild, and all of her 9 so-called royal children, they were all sired by Lionel Nathan Rothschild, so they were all illegitimate. And Queen Victoria's children were sent out to marry the other royal families of Europe, and then the Rothschilds went round from 1918 to 1945 and showed the royal families that they'd married into the illegitimate British royal family line, and removed all the royal families of Europe on that basis. So the Dutch royal family was illegitimate by itself because they produced a Mongoloid child in 1909. I can't remember what the official name is for Mongoloid. There's a more politically correct name for it. Down syndrome. So the Dutch royal family gave birth to a Down syndrome child in 1909, and their palace was in the middle of nowhere near Utrecht. And there was a farmhouse at the end of the drive, and they had a daughter at the same time. So they swapped daughters. They gave the Down syndrome child to the people in the farmhouse at the bottom of the palace drive, and took their child, which had a cleft palate, and they named it Julia, and then they made her queen. And then, so no one wanted her because the royal families knew she was a commoner. And then the commoner, Queen Julia of the Netherlands, she gave birth to Queen Beatrice. And I was staying in the Netherlands for about 13 months back in 2013. And I'm only supposed to be there for 3 months. And this very beautiful immigration officer, about 32, blonde, she sits next to me at the bar. She says, "How come you're here? How come you're here for so long?" And I said, "Oh, here's my title." So I rallied off my titles, and she goes, "I believe you." That was on a Friday. And then on the Monday, Queen Beatrice of the Netherlands resigned. Right? She was scared of my titles, and she knew that her own royal family were illegitimate. So what's happened with the royal families of Europe and the royal families of Britain is when you know that they're illegitimate, they will, and you expose it in the correct way, they will resign. And that's what's been happening, right? So I sent a proclamation of about 60 pages to Queen Elizabeth in 2021, in early 2021, and it was on the Magna Carta. And I proved that the Magna Carta was an absolute fake, total, absolute fraud. It's called a pious fraud. It was invented by the Catholic Church. It was never in England. It first got into Britain in the 1620s, and then it was kind of habilitated, which is where they try to make an instrument and they place it in various official places so that it looks like it was always there. But King John never saw the Magna Carta in 1215. He never saw it in his lifetime. And there's no parliamentary references to the Magna Carta. I've emailed them constantly and contacted them constantly, and they initially responded. And when I said, look, all the Magna Cartas that you're showing me are not the original, they're not copies of the original, they're not exemplifications of the original, they have no seals attached, they have no signatures attached, and they're not even the original draft copies, and they're not even the original copies of drafts. They're perhaps an exemplification of a copy of a draft. And then when I follow all of their leads to find the Magna Carta, it just goes round and round in a circle. So their central point is the Magna Carta exists, yay, here's a full website showing the Magna Carta and everything about it, and you follow it and it just goes round and round and round in a circle. So what we've got is a whole lot of fake documents and a whole lot of fake royals, right? And then the illegitimacy continues from Queen Victoria's children. So King Edward VII was the son of Lionel Nathan Rothschild, and he sired Winston Churchill, who then sired Queen Elizabeth. But there appear to be more than one Queen Elizabeth. There's one with straight teeth, one with crooked teeth. So from Edward VII, there was George V, and Edward VII was bypassed as the breeding male because he was the son of Winston, who was the son of the Rothschilds, and then George V was the son of Tsar Alexander III of Russia, and then there was George VI, who was actually legitimate, and then there was Queen Elizabeth, who wasn't legitimate because George VI sired an epileptic son, which they left to die in the hospital gurney in 1925. So Elizabeth Bell's line was replaced with her maid, who was a twin, and that was confirmed by Lion's Made ice cream starting at the same time in Kensington in 1925. So that was in your face. And then we had Winston Churchill, son of King Edward VII, siring Queen Elizabeth. Now the theory about her is you've got one with crooked teeth and one with straight teeth. And the person who made the coronation dresses for Queen Elizabeth II's coronation in 1953, she made 4 dresses, not one, but 4 of different sizes, because there were 4 different Queen Elizabeths. Apparently there was twins, so one had crooked teeth and one had straight teeth. There was Elizabeth Bell's Lyon's maid, who was a twin, so there was her daughter, supposedly Queen Elizabeth, and then her sister's daughter, another stand-in for Queen Elizabeth. So, and then you've got Winston Churchill's actual daughter, who was about 3.5 years older than Queen Elizabeth. So you had 4 Queen Elizabeths and 4 coronation dresses. And what I think happened is they drew straws to see who would actually get crowned. And the one who was crowned, the Queen Elizabeth who was crowned, had a ski slope nose, you know, like that. And then the Queen Elizabeth you saw as an elder woman did not have a ski slope nose. It was a straight, pudgy nose. And then you had the Queen Elizabeth turning up with straight teeth and Queen Elizabeth turning up with crooked teeth. The whole thing's just been a giant sham, waiting for it to be exposed as a giant sham so that we can push the reset button and say that the British royal family has actually never existed. And we're still at the position of King of England as the last legal entity, or rather Queen Elizabeth I is Queen of England as the last legal entity. And then her mother was Queen Anne Boleyn, who survived her execution. Her grandson was Walter Raleigh, who was the next true King of England, which is why the first thing that James VI of Scotland, when he came to England, first thing he did was jail Walter Raleigh for 13 years. Right?
Greg, it seems to me Queen Elizabeth II has been very, very popular, and Prince Philip certainly looks the role of the Prince Consort, but the situation seemed to me completely different with Charles. Wouldn't it have been better to have finessed Charles and gone right to William, who with Kate is really popular among the British people?
Well, I have to say that Americans know absolutely nothing about the British royal family, and you've been sold a pup in every way, right? Queen Elizabeth II was illegitimate. She was extorted into marriage by Philip and his uncle, Lord Louis Mountbatten, on the basis that Elizabeth was illegitimate. So that's how Philip married her. He had 2 suits and 20 quid when he married her. So he was pretty much worthless. He was borderline whether he was a prince or not, you know. And they always made him appear tall. They always got the camera and shot up at him so he looked like a really tall man. He was 5'9". Weighed about 110 pounds, you know. He was a short guy, right? So that whole thing was a sham, and it was actually written up in the 1953 Disney movie Peter Pan as the two raccoons, which was the raconteur and the racketeer. And the two raccoons were Prince Philip and Lord Lou Mountbatten, who were actually extorting the British royal family.
Well, Charles seems to me to be, I mean, this is my personal opinion, a total mediocrity. I cannot see him fit to rule. He's a globalist. He's into global warming. He seems to me to be just inadequate to the role, Greg. And I don't want to put you on any hot seats. I'm just saying that's my take, and that he and Camilla should be, reigning in England seems to me to be some kind of minor atrocity.
Oh, no, it is. You got it right on the button. Yeah, it is. So, there is a theory that Jacob Rothschild is the siring father of Prince Charles. And Lord Porchester is the siring father of Prince Andrew. And Lord Plunket is the siring father of Prince Edward. And that Philip's only legitimate child was Princess Anne, who kind of, is very manly. And people are scared of her. She's portrayed as like this dark ghost floating down the hallway. Like a horror movie. I find that quite funny. So Camilla Parker Bowles is Prince Charles' controller. They had a child together conceived on her 18th birthday when he was still 16. And that son is Simon Charles Day. He's now Simon Charles Durante Day, and he's got 9 black children. So Prince Charles and Camilla have 9 half black grandchildren, which they're doing their best to not acknowledge. Now, Prince Charles is an incredibly weak character, and he is from 420 years of illegitimacy. Right, the British royal family's been illegitimate for 420 years, and Prince Charles has absolutely no royal qualities at all, none. And because he recognises that the British royal family are illegitimate, he's trying to take over the world and make himself king of the world, while ignoring Great Britain because it's not a legal entity, while ignoring England because it has been a legal entity since 1603, while ignoring the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland because it's not a legal entity, and while ignoring the Parliament of Great Britain because it's not a legal entity. So, and while being part of a family, British royal family, that is predominantly illegitimate, using a crown that's not real, using an orb that's not real, using a scepter that's not real, and sitting over a coronation stone that is actually a sewerage manhole cover. Right? The coronation stone they're using is a sewerage manhole cover. Right? Now, I found the real coronation stone because I'm the King of England. I went to Scotland and I found the real coronation stone. I hired an 8-ton digger and I dug it up. It was like my height underground if my hair's the grass, It was perfectly done. And it was exactly where they said it would be on the old maps. And they named the towns according to my name so that I could produce a Tau cross, which is that shape. So a mile from here to here, and then 1.5 miles down there, and then 333 feet in. And that was exactly where the stone was. And the names of the town, first syllable H-A-L, second syllable L-E-T-T. Hallett. So that actually marked the towns because they knew who was going to uncover the stone. Right?
And of course, if the stone were not in Westminster when the coronation took place, the coronation cannot have been authentic.
Oh, the coronation wasn't authentic by any means. And because Charles's catch and release for his crimes, And because it was a fake crown, the crown was stolen in 1216, stolen again in 1410. It was stolen again in the 1650s. It was stolen and crushed in 1671. And the orb and scepter, they were stolen. And in 1671, the scepter was cut in half with a hacksaw. And the crown was crushed in half, flattened, and then stuffed down someone's trousers.
Greg, hold that thought. We have a break here, and we'll return with a man who would be king, Greg Hallett, right after this break.